Back on the 24th of November, I said a cold end of November, beginning of December, but with the Magellan Oscillation rotating into phases 3, 4, and 5, we would see a turnaround taking place around the 7th or 8th of December, and it's almost bang on cue. You can see here the rotation through phases 3 into now 4 as we move into the month of December. And now we will continue to see that progress through 4, 5, and eventually into 6 and 7. This is a slightly hard to see version of that. The green line represents where the forecast is going. And yes, it goes into the null phase, which is the inner circle, but it is rotating into colder phases once again. So the period in the run up to Christmas is something to watch, despite the warm up that we're seeing now. This is a slightly closer version, but it's a little bit out of date compared to the smaller version, if you will. And I just want to show you this here, that I believe personally, with a little bit of forcing with Enzo, IOD as well, playing a role in this current spell, but we go back towards neutral Arctic oscillation and North Atlantic oscillation, but repeating patterns, I believe, towards the end of this month, sometime around Christmas, New Year, we'll go back negative, both in the Arctic oscillation and the North Atlantic oscillation, keeping a very close eye on the stratosphere at the moment, because we are seeing that strong warming taking place over Siberia towards North America. This is upcoming week 1 of the ECMWF weeklies, and you've got that very strong warming taking place here. Remember what I said in recent videos, how I want to see the warming now starting to show up over the pole, over Greenland. That would tend to correlate 10 to 14 days afterwards to a possible blocking where that reds show up. And of course, for the UK and Ireland, Western Europe, you want to see that red showing up over Greenland and the North Atlantic to have that reflection. You of course need to have the stratosphere couple with the troposphere, but we are seeing a lot of influence. Heat fluxes moving out of the troposphere into the stratosphere, hence the warming that we're seeing at the moment. And then it's a progression. But you notice here it kind of shrinks slightly, that warming, as we move into week 2 here. So going back to week 1, strong warming, Siberia towards Canada. That is a Canadian warming. Week 2, you can see here a little shrinking, but the continuation of that warming. But watch this space as we move towards the Christmas period and into early January. You're starting to see that warming regroup, but notice it's starting to shift towards the Arctic, towards the pole, towards Greenland here. And then as we continue to progress through, this is the period now between the 8th and the 15th of January. Now in the winter forecast and even the December outlook, a mention about a stratospheric warming, a major sudden stratospheric warming, is expected sometime early to mid-January, with the biggest consequence potentially of that being in the early portions of February here. So we'll wait and see what happens. It's not a given that it's going to take place. But also looking at the situation with regards to the mean zonal winds. This is the 10 HPA zonal winds, and you can see that it stays, the thick blue line is the ensemble mean, so that's all the models merged together to create this ensemble. But what happens is, you notice it's starting to drift towards the red line here, the bottom red line representing close to fairly major warming. Notice there's more and more models now showing between, around New Year to the middle portion of January. There is more members now seeing that reversal. Once these winds go down to 0 or below into minus territory, that is the westerly wind reversed to an easterly, and that would represent a proper definition of a major sudden stratospheric warming taking place. But we are seeing a lot of pressure. I showed you wave 1, I showed you wave 2 of that warming taking place out of Asia, across the top and into at least North America and even towards the Baffin Straits here. But it's interesting nonetheless to see that the ECMWF is now starting to center that warming more towards the Greenland side of the North Pole here. So it's all to play for. It could go horribly wrong, or it could go exactly as expected here. Certainly, the pattern so far is playing out as expected. So this is the 850 temperatures of the GFS model. The here and now, we do have warmer air now starting to cycle around this area of low pressure that's moved across the southern half of Ireland and the British Isles during the course of today. Notice here we're pulling in something a little bit warmer, so we are seeing the temperatures recovering. Even up here in Edmonton, north of Inverness, we did see the temperature bump up to around 6.5 degrees Celsius above freezing. Started off yesterday morning -9, rose to plus 1.6. That would have been below zero if there had been snow on the ground. Then we dropped close to -6 last night, stayed around the -2, -3 during the overnight period, and then that warm air did move into the first half of today. We've seen a drop back in the temperature as that area of low pressure moved east. We've seen the temperatures dropping off, and we are seeing as that system moves into the near continent, some of that cold air over southern Scandinavia is now getting drawn back into the northern half of the British Isles. That's going to set the scene with clear skies tonight. Temperatures drop back below freezing once again, and it's going to create a cold day tomorrow. So this is a slow recovery back to an Atlantic driven pattern. It is not just a quick sweep out of the cold and we're back into the warmer. It doesn't work quite like that. But you notice here, as these areas of low pressure start to wind up over the Atlantic, you're starting to get all that warm, juicy air over the central tropical Atlantic and subtropical Atlantic, and that will get drawn into these circulations of low pressure, and eventually we will kick that cold out of the way towards the middle and second half of this week. So that's the time frame, 7th, 8th of December, exactly as expected here, and this is, I believe anyway, strictly down to the MJO rotating into the phases of 3, 4, and 5. Those are warm phases. So that is the reason why I felt quite confident that this cold spell was going to only last towards the end of week 1, beginning of week 2 here. How long does the spell last for? Well, I don't think we're overly far away from cold air. The cold air is always pretty close by. By the way, as this warmer air moves in, we are going to have some cold Arctic air trapped at the surface, warmer air running over the top, so it's not going to be a clear-cut sweeping out of that cold air. We may see wintry mix, we may see a little bit of freezing rain, we might even see some snow, especially in the leading edge of cold fronts moving in off the Atlantic. But all the while, that middle portion of the atmosphere will be warming up during Wednesday, Thursday, and into Friday here, and eventually that mixes down to the surface, and we will all be in something milder as we move towards the upcoming weekend. So by the time we reach 12 UTC, Thursday the 7th of December, there's the milder air now starting to kind of move in once again. These areas of low pressure may have some potency to it. Might see some severe gales, for example, through the Irish Sea, eastern side of Ireland, western side of the UK, England, Wales, Scotland. We could see some fairly strong winds associated with this. Then we've got another system moving across the Atlantic. That too is drawing in some milder air. Nothing exceptionally warm, may I add, but milder air nonetheless. We continue to play through the loop. We've got these little kind of back and forths, but the overall emphasis is on milder conditions. Notice here an area of high pressure, 1042 by the way, so a fairly decent area of high pressure. This is the pressure versus the 850 millibar temperatures, of course, and you see that area of low pressure centered to the south, not to the north, to the south. Therefore, we're dragging in air from, between the Azores and down towards the Canaries. We're dragging that milder air around that area of high pressure and into the UK here. And that is right down to the textbook phase 3, 4, and 5 of the MJO. But it's all eyes on that MJO rotating back towards 7, eventually possibly 8 and 1, conjunction with the stratospheric warming that we're seeing at the moment. Not major, not a reversal, but we are seeing a lot of stress being put on the stratospheric polar vortex. So we will have to watch closely at what's taking place. But you notice here, by the time we reach Wednesday the 20th of December, only 5 days from Christmas, We're starting to see something colder coming back in again, but possibly a temporary shot. I don't know. I can't give you the details at the moment. But so far, so good. The pattern is playing out quite nicely here. As I've said already, the winter idea that December sees the middle portion of the month back in Atlantic air once again. Then we have a possibility with that MJO shifting into phase 7 of something colder towards the Christmas and New Year period. Then I think that we are going to see a cold spell during the first half, at least the first half of January, possible pullback during the second half of January. And then if we happen to see that SSW taking place, I think we could be really in for something as we move towards the end of January and the first half of February. We're going to see back and forths between milder conditions and warmer conditions. That's the overall forecast that I have out. Be sure to check out the winter forecast and the December outlook on markloganweather.com. The link is in the description below. So these are these areas of low pressure now moving in. Cold front moves through. On the leading edge, we see some snow, possible disruption, especially over high ground. We may see some flooding taking place. Cumbria, for example, where we've had in areas upwards of a foot of snow over the weekend. What an incredible snow scenes that we were seeing in some parts of the UK over the weekend, particularly so Cumbria. But there's one frontal system moving through. In comes the next area of low pressure at 954 and 955 millibars. Notice, thankfully, it kind of stays just to the west of Ireland here, but the strongest winds will be on the south and southeastern flank. We could see some disruption due to those winds as we move into the period Thursday night and into Friday. That's a fairly deep area of low pressure driven by a 200 plus mile per hour jet, by the way. Then that system then weakens considerably as it moves into the near continent. Notice here it's off Ireland as a 955 millibar low. By the time it's over the North Sea, it's over 1,000 millibars. So a tremendous filling of that area of low pressure. We always talk about how quickly areas of low pressure strengthen, but this is almost the opposite, where we see a deep low become a very flabby, almost non-existent feature by the time it reaches the North Sea here. Then we've got another frontal system moving through. So we've got this series of Atlantic systems moving in off the Atlantic here and bringing spells of wind and rain. Let's have a look at the CFSV2. This is the mean 500 millibar geopotential heights. Week 1, we've got that strong negative here extending from the Atlantic across the southern half of the UK, Ireland, and into the near continent. But the storm track is now shifted north, if you notice here. Week 2, this is a milder theme. We've got a weaker negative to the west of the UK that has a southwesterly component to it, higher pressure over the continent. Then into week 3, you can see here that we're starting to build the heights over Scandinavia, so we need to keep a close eye on that. And then the following week, we've also got an area of low pressure here coming in. That represents a firmly Atlantic-driven pattern through the whole of the rest of December. Let's have a look and see what the precipitation is indicating here. So week 1, you can see here that we're back in the wetter than average conditions here. Week 2, we continue with the wetter than average. Week 3, it slightly dries out. Then we're back into the wetter than average for the following week here. Looking at the temperature anomaly, remember that CFSV2 does have a warm bias, of course. We need to take that into consideration. Looking at the CFSV2 2-meter temperature anomalies, so colder than average, generally from about the Liverpool, Manchester area north, slightly warmer than average further south. Week 2, look at that there. Look at the big change around. There's your phase 3, 4, and 5 of the MJO right there. Then as we move towards the period in the run-up to Christmas, 18th through the 25th, we've got warmer than average conditions. CFSV2 has this warmer than average to the end of this month. Looking at the Copernicus chart here, finally, December. This is all the models combined: ECM, Met Office, Meteo France, CMCC, DWD, NCEP, JMA, ECCC. You've got that negative between Iceland and the UK here. That is an Atlantic-driven pattern. What's January looking like? You can see here that is indicating more blocking North Atlantic up towards Greenland and the Arctic here. This is what I'm showing you here. Look at February and look at March. Stronger blocking showing up. So this is exactly what the idea is with regards to my forecast. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe if you're interested in meteorology and the big picture. See you again tomorrow. Bye for now.